So Betty, are we back to you? Are you going to guide us?
I will try my best. I will begin by saying I'm excited that we are discussing Jane Hirshfield's poetry, because I believe that as a group, she reflects interests that we all have. And in science, the power of science, and the power of imagery, and the power of bringing our understanding and exploration of language. So we're going to be looking at some of those poems that do just that. Her bio is very impressive. She's, of course, an award-winning poet, essayist, and translator. She is the author of 9 collections of poetry and has been a finalist in many, many organizations or, well, how do we call it? Awards, excuse me, a finalist for many different awards. She has a lot of influences, drawing from science as well as the world's literary, intellectual, artistic, and religious traditions. One of the favorite quotes I found in her bio from Poetry Foundation was, she put aside her writing for nearly 8 years to study at the San Francisco Zen Center. And she said, quote, "I felt that I'd never make much of a poet if I didn't know more than I knew at that time about what it means to be a human being," unquote. And she said, quote, "I don't think poetry is based just on poetry. It is based on a thoroughly lived life," unquote. Many of her poems come from her exploration, as I said, of language. So I think we're going to be looking at some of those poems where she looks and does an essay of prepositional phrases and how they work. We'll also be looking at perhaps that she was a organizer of poets in science, poets for science, that's what it's called. And so let's get to it.
Betty, I'm sorry, but it might be worth, I'd like to make an observation as we start, and it's not to dispute anything that's been said. I have to believe that virtually every poet we've looked at, including all of us, have some idea about how poetry operates.
Yes.
What happens to us in the creative process, a whole list of many layers. We've looked at poets who have taken the time to deliberately set out their theory of poetics. But I would assume that virtually every poet, if squeezed, would stammer something about how poetry operates. So I'm really interested in looking at Jane Hirshfield's poetry because she's a poet. And I don't know if I even have expectations about how much light will be shed, maybe a lot. I will actually be surprised if her poetic voice intercedes with her critics, let's call it, voice. But that's just fine. I mean, this will give us a chance to step back from her theories, which we started with, and we've not done that with many poets, and see how we become informed about what she thinks about poetry. That's pretty close to what everybody else has been saying. It's just my own version. Okay, I'm done.
What came in first? Ron, I think yours came in first.
I sent mine in first because I wanted to make sure no one else grabbed it.
Well, let's do some optimism then.
and it's hard to resist reading this.
So I think you should.
Good.
Read it.
Yes.
I was struck. I was looking at websites, and I saw this poem, just the title listed, and I was really captivated by the title. I wanted to hear what she had to say about optimism, and I liked what she wrote. I was surprised at how much, for me, Wendell Berry echoed in the poem, and of course, they share many themes and concerns about the state of the planet and environmental issues, etc. So, optimism. More and more, I have come to admire resilience, not the simple resistance of a pillow whose foam returns over and over to the same shape, but the sinuous tenacity of a tree. Finding the light newly blocked on one side, it turns on another. A blind intelligence, true. But out of such persistence arose turtles, rivers, mitochondria, figs, all this resinous, unretractable earth.
Short.
There were things I really liked in the poem. I love the phrase sinuous tenacity. And the way it captures both the delicacy and the staying power of a tree.
I don't want to make light of this, but it reminds me of the times when you read that if just humankind would step aside, the world would be fine. That the earth would recover quite quickly.
Yeah, but we're all part of that resin.
Yeah.
True, but she does not, when she talks about a blind intelligence, peoplehood don't get a mention there.
No, but what I like is that it's a continuum. And so as things are coming, these unretractable things are coming out of the earth, it doesn't mean that they can't go back into the earth. And many times everything does go back into the earth. So the fact that she doesn't mention humans, I think also is, I can read into that we're only here for a certain period of time as well. We're going to time out.
And would she say that we have sinuous tenacity? It'd be interesting to know what qualities then she would ascribe to human beings. Either, probably, I would guess, in contrast. But
I would say the biggest contrast to me is that whose foam returns over and over to the same shape. And then from that point, the poem turns and she talks about nature exclusively. I think there is a comparison. A foam pillow. Why didn't she say a feathered pillow? The foam pillow, to me, puts it in modern times, late 20th century. A foam pillow is a product of an industrial society, and the fact that you can put your head on or your hand into the foam and it'll return to its shape. It doesn't keep that shape, not like the earth. If you put your hand in a pound of rich soil, it'll absorb that shape. I feel those are the two, I don't want to say conflicts, but those are the two comparisons, the foam pillow and the tree, in my mind.
And it's a really interesting observation that one is man-made, and then the rest of it, she's talking about what I would say would be, something that happens in nature that without the help of a man or humans.
so, Betty, you know more about Jane Hirshfield and her poetry, I think, than there is. This, I would have to guess this is a representative poem.
I would say it's a representative poem, and I do think that what she's talking about is the resilience of earth and the creatures on it and the soil. And I think that's what I was hearing in the discussion now with my and others.
What was your attraction to the poem? Was it the title itself?
That's what drew me to the poem. But then, even from reading the first line, more and more I have come to admire resilience. I love that isolation in one sentence of the theme. And then I like very much how then she takes it up. And doesn't take it up really in human terms, but grants things and nature their sanctity. And one of the things I discovered this, and partly I can articulate it because I'm conscious of it because of reading a poem like this. I'm really captivated by people who manage reverence well, don't gush, quiet, almost like a psalm, and not pontificating in some other vein. I like how quiet the poem is. Can I answer you?
I'm willing to dig deep for meaning, but I am really taken by simplicity of images. I appreciate a poet who can look at a pillow, which is, a pretty common object, to illustrate a point. I understand why you said Wendell Berry and others who focus so much on the dailiness of life for lessons. And I admire the sharpness and the clearness of this. I think it's interesting to me, and I am glad that we are reading her poetry. It is much more accessible than her discussion of poetry. But why don't I, since I just called mine up, read mine. I chose the one, Things Keep Sorting Themselves. Okay, are we?
Yeah.
Does the butterfat know it is butterfat? Milk know it's milk? No. Something just goes and something remains. Like a boarding house table, men on one side, women on the other. Nobody planned it. Plaid shirts next to one another, talking in accents from the Midwest. Nobody plans to be a ghost. Later on, the young people sit in the kitchen. Soon enough, they'll be the ones to stumble, excuse me, and quickly withdraw. But they don't know that. No one can ever know that.
I like the theme of the poem, and I like the way she selects instances of randomness, haphazardness, and the absence of deliberate ordering, all of that. Another thing that I really liked about this poem when you sent it out, Amory, is it sounds so playful to me. It's got a very serious subject, and it gets more and more serious as it moves along. So there's a real nugget of wisdom at the end, but they don't know that. No one can ever know that. Still, it's so accepting of that randomness when human beings so much insist on order.
Does it, do you think it's a bit of a, there's a connection to her phrase in the last poem, a blind intelligence? She contributed a blind intelligence to nature, but here she's almost illustrating some sort of a blind intelligence to human nature.
It's an idea we might keep in mind for when we return to her discussing her poetics, because what I was calling an agency, we don't have to get into it now, in poetry, it might be similar to the phrase blind intelligence.
Okay.
It looks connected.
And it seems similar in that she's making observations, and she's bringing us from these examples into the middle of it. I'm gonna mute.
Somebody's dog just went crazy.
It's a puppy.
Mike, I couldn't hear the dog because you were talking, Mike.
Mike's got a new puppy.
And I thought it was a chicken quacking.
May we see the puppy?
Yes, look at that. Oh my gosh.
Oh, it's so cute.
A labradoodle, right?
I'm not seeing it.
Labradoodle. What are they called? You can't see it? Oh, it's a big teddy bear. Look how fluffy and happy. Oh, I just want to. Oh, it's so cute.
Yeah.
Okay.
Laura's dog.
I thought of so many things in reading this. Her example isn't there, but I heard someone again discussing the fact that a fish can't describe water to you because it just is all of the fish's world. It doesn't understand water because it can't understand the absence of water. I certainly thought of the fact that in any church or classroom, people know who sits where. And I'm not too sure. We could talk about any number of reasons, but there's just that. You watch it at conferences. People come in the first day, they find their chairs, and it's upsetting if it's not there for you the next day, then it becomes yours. High school cafeterias. People sit where they're going to sit, and then it kind of becomes ritual.
Well, we are creatures of habit.
Yeah. For better and for worse.
Absolutely.
I think.
Well, I think that's what she tries to do here, is show us that some common things that we see every day, we pass them by, we don't think about it very much. And it relates it to our own growing old or becoming a different person. So when you're young, you think everything's, you're invincible. You don't have to worry about some of the things that you have your blinders on.
Or I think there's two. We don't, in some ways by happenstance at that boarding house, the men sat down together. They'd been working and now they sat down together, and then the women sit down together. But I want to know what the line about ghost means.
Yeah.
Nobody plans to be a ghost.
If there was a graph of the mood of this poem and my perception of the mood, when it hits, it kind of is in a midpoint, and when it goes to no one plans to be a ghost, it goes down, and then later there's an upward movement. It's kind of like left field to me. I don't know if I have any insights on that, except perhaps it's a hint to the rest of the poem of what she's actually trying to illustrate for us.
Does the line mean no one plans to be invisible? Or does the line mean nobody plans on dying? I can read it at least those two ways.
And could she be implying both?
And could it be both?
Does it have to do with fate? Or just human nature?
So later on, I think the clue in when I read the poem is that she might be referring to both because of the following line. Later on, the young people sit in the kitchen. And that might be the time that they hear about their ancestors.
The ancestors who are the ghosts?
People that came before them who have passed on, perhaps. Soon enough, they'll be the ones to stumble, excuse me, and quickly withdraw, right, to age. But they don't know it right then. I mean, I'm paraphrasing what she's saying, but I think that she, like many of the poets that we've studied and discussed, they give multiple opportunities for this, each line, more than one.
When I read the line, "Nobody plans to be a ghost," the thing that struck me most prominently is the thought that not everyone dies peacefully. Not everyone passes from this world in peace, and that there are troubled spirits. Nobody plans to be one.
Mm-hmm.
No one shapes their life that way. And that line, "to stumble, excuse me," is almost like a direct object. To stumble, excuse me, and quickly withdraw. It's the person totally out of control. Mike and Linda can tell you, like me in the top row of the stadium, where I feel most fragile.
So, Ron, am I hearing you correctly? Are you saying that in several places or a couple, those two places in the poem, she's giving the opportunity for multiple meanings or several meanings?
Yes, I think she does that. Yeah. I think it's one of the, we can say that her poems are eminently clear, the phrases and sentences, but they're layers of meaning.
Mhm.
So I read that chapter 5 on uncertainty, Hirshfield's book, and it just makes me wonder, like, how much of this do we have to know that she has defined, or how much of it is what we take from it, and then that's good enough.
Mhm.
I think that's an interesting question. I think I'm going to guess there are some poets who would be quite disappointed if we didn't end up where they thought they were leading us.
Mm.
And perhaps there are others who just kind of bless their words and then they mean what they mean to you.
Mhm.
Oh.
Well, I like your term, like mystery. I think she would say certainly that her world is one that's just packed with mystery and not dark, just the unknown, the unknowable, the tendency for human beings to know, the need to know. I love the thing about plaid shirts sitting next to one another. The Midwest needs to think about that more.
Reminded me of the number of coffee shops where the guys go to start the day.
Did it feel at all a bit old-fashioned? Do you? I was wondering if if they're older folks, perhaps people over 40, might be more, have more of a tendency to divide up by sex. Actually, I'll say people over 50 might divide a room up in groups unknowingly by sex, and a younger generation might mix more. Is that, did anyone have that thought? I don't know, I did. I wondered if it kind of was a clue that we were dealing with perhaps an older group of people for the table.
The point you just made hadn't struck me, but I think that the word boarding house dates the poem. I don't mean dates it as to when it was written, but the time period it's thinking about. Do we even have the concept of boarding houses now?
Yeah, I think that's an older term. Was there well, Jane is born in 1953, so she's in her 60s and has a foot, strongly in both centuries.
Yeah, but I think of boarding houses out of the 30s and 40s and maybe into the 50s that were both very separate. The people at the last saying, "Excuse me," and off they go. But where people gathered at least once a day to eat together. I just don't think we have that equivalent.
And it sounds very Southern as well.
It's interesting that in the work poem Optimism, Mike, I think, made the observation, and then the rest of us agreed that there's no humans in it. In this poem, it's all humans. And put the two together, you get a world with some interesting dynamics. And we didn't plan that either in the way we chose the poem.
Let's throw a blessing for the wedding into the mix and see what that does to our conversation.
I agree.
Linda, do you want to read, or should somebody else?
I can read it. If I have to stop, I will. A blessing for wedding. Today, when persimmons ripen, today, when foxkits come out of their den into snow, today, when the spotted egg releases its wren song, today, when the maple sets down its red leaves, today, when windows keep their promise to open, today, when fire keeps its promise to warm, today, when someone you love has died, or someone you never met has died, today, when someone you love has been born, or someone you will not meet has been born, today, when rain leaps to the waiting of roots in their dryness, today, when starlight bends to the roofs of the hungry and tired, today, when someone sits long inside his last sorrow, today, when someone steps into the heat of her first embrace, today, let this light bless you. With these friends, let it bless you. With snow scent and lavender, bless you. Let the vow of this day keep itself wildly and holy, spoken and silent, surprise you inside your ears, sleeping and walking, unfold itself inside your eyes. Let its fierceness and tenderness hold you. Let its vastness be undisguised in all your days.
I think she was saying sleeping and waking in the third to the last line.
Yeah, she was. Yeah. That was just a stumble on Linda's part.
Yes. And it was beautifully read, Linda. It's a beautiful poem.
There were lots of it that appealed to me. And one of the lines was, today when someone you love has died, or someone you never met has died. Have you ever been on the freeway and seen a terrible ambulance? I mean, a terrible wreck and an ambulance there, and worried about whoever it was that died, I have done that and said silent prayers for someone I don't know and felt sad.
Mhm.
I love all the imagery in here, the sort of natural world imagery, the way that she begins with that. And it has both things that are familiar and unfamiliar. And I think it tantalizes your curiosity and surprises you. And I like that word surprise in the fourth to the end line. I just like it.
Mhm.
I think it's beautiful. I think you grabbed the beautiful one. I like that sense. A blessing for your wedding. When someone's getting married, it's just the most important thing, and they are the most important person in the world, particularly the bride. Just it's center of the universe, and all of these reminders that all of these other things, people are living and loving and dying and kissing and crying, and you're not the center of the universe, but you are woven into this whole web of what's happening on that special day. And I just think that's quite wonderful.
Yeah.
I think it's a call to remind your wedding day or any other good day where everything seems open and wonderful.
I would say, or any day. Yes.
Or any day. Yes, or any day.
And I also would add to that it's rooted in plants, animals, eggs, trees, fierceness and tenderness, and the vastness beyond. So she's able to bring in the whole universe in a wedding blessing. And I think that's vintage Jane Hirshfield, to do it through images as she does.
Would you say this is a wedding taking place in late fall? Do you get a sense of a season?
I think it could be used at any time.
Well,
But-
she talked
Well,
When fox kids come out of their den into snow, but she's talking about all days. It could be any day.
well, the maple is sending down red leaves, and the fox kids come out into the snow. So it probably is that time of year. But I like the way the poem comes around to the wedding vow at the end, and then the wish, the blessing for the participants in the last 6 lines. If we're going to try to provide 6 lines as a promise for people who are vowing their lives and fortunes to one another in marriage, wow.
Yes. Wow.
as you
We can probably end the discussion with wow.
One of the things that I am particularly taken with is that section that starts where Ron suggested that the vow this day keep itself wildly and wholly. There are many times when people will talk about and use all 3: holy as in sacred, holy as entirely, and holy as in it's got some holes in it. And I like that she has used not holy as you would in many wedding ceremonies, but holy as in all encompassing. And
so are you coming around to admire puns now, Emery?
I don't know, because I don't consider that a pun.
Well, it's better than a pun, which is a play on words, but
Yeah, to me, it's not a play on words. It's holding up. No, I'm not, Ron. Since you ask, I'm not coming around to puns.
She
well,
never will come around to puns.
it's a word with an enriched meaning. But,
Mm.
you know, thank you.
I think that the two lines that struck me so, though, today when someone sits long inside his last sorrow, today when someone steps into the heat of her first embrace.
Mm.
I think that's lovely. Linda, we should have had this one read at our wedding.
Well, maybe we will read it when we have our next celebration
There
in
you go.
2023.
There you go.
Well,
Yay.
maybe the next time I get married.
Yes, Ron, we're counting on that. We
There's
want
always
all to
hope.
be invited. We will read it as a chorus.
Yes, we all better be invited to that.